took me a really long time, honestly, coming home from China, about 5 or 6 years, until I realized that the way that I was going to try to affect change, starting out, was to think like, we're in America, we're a consumer culture. I am going to see if I can create companies or work on businesses that help consumers start to consume in a more sustainable manner. That's my starting conversation recently with like the former mayor of like Barranquilla in Colombia, right? And he did something where he was like, look, we're gonna go plant all these trees. And people are like, no, it's gonna be too expensive, or no, like they're gonna get in the way. And he was like, well, look at this. In London, where trees have been intentionally planted, the value of the buildings and the homes on those streets have gone up by 10%, and that means tax revenue has also gone up by 10%. And so the return on investment for the city, if we plant these trees in a very hot area where kids are like sometimes even passing out on the way to school, will not only have these health benefits, it's actually going to pay for itself. There's a return on investment to the city, right? I immediately thought like, oh my gosh, no. She's attracted to me.
Yeah.
She said, I was like, she's attracted to me. This is crazy.
It's awkward.
Yeah, so awkward. Like, what's gonna happen? Yeah, where's this night going? I'm going to a new apartment, never been there. I'm subletting a room. There's a roommate. I don't even know where the key is. Like, what?
Certainly, creating a warm and engaging mechanism for your podcast, consider Great Tell Me as a suggestion that combines an upbeat and inviting spirit without any background music. Welcome to Tangelic Talks, your go-to podcast from Tangelic, where we dive into the vibrant world of clean energy, development, sustainability, and climate change in Africa. We bring you inspiring stories, insightful discussions, and groundbreaking innovations from the continent making waves in the global community. Tune in and join the conversation toward a brighter, greener future. Let's get started.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Tangelic Talks, a podcast at the intersection of energy, equity, and empowerment with your host, Andres Tamez and Victoria Cornelio. Victoria, can you please introduce this week's wonderful guest?
Yes. Today on Tangelic Talks, we're talking about climate action that actually fits into real life with Josh Dorfman. Am I saying that correctly? I really like your last name. It's really cool. Josh is a climate entrepreneur who spent his career building companies at the front lines of the low carbon economy. Most recently, he was a co-founder and CEO of Planted, spelled without the E, a carbon negative building materials startup recognized by Fast Company as one of the world's most innovative companies of 2024. Through his work, including Supercool, which you should check out, Josh makes a compelling case that we already have the tools to solve the climate crisis. The challenge isn't technology alone, it's leadership, accessibility, and scale, which is exactly where we're going to jump into today. So thank you for being here, Josh.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for saying that you think my last name is I don't know what you excited that you like it. I rarely hear that.
That's cool.
Really? It's so cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, you've got a stage name.
You know, the funny thing is, when I was in business school, I dated this girl who from Germany, and I went to visit her and meet her whole family in Frankfurt. And apparently, like, Dorfman is not too distant from like Doofman, which means village idiot. And her grandma the whole time was just like Doofman, and I was just trying to be. I'm like, yeah, it sounds close enough, you know.
Yes.
So, yeah.
Right. Wow, that makes me like it even more. It's quite funny. It's very good. It's a bit of a stage name. How did you, with such a cool name, get into this sort of intersection that you're in? You're working with leaders, businesses, but in the sustainability space, which is sometimes, I can imagine, quite the challenge.
Yeah, I mean, accidentally, I would say. And the quick story for me is it goes back 30 years. I was in China a year after university, 1995, thinking, okay, if I can get myself to China, something cool will happen. I will go to the other side of the world and see if I can, live, thrive, and survive. So I got a job teaching English on a university. And within a month, I got another job working in a factory that made bicycle locks. It was an American company called Kryptonite. And I was like, this is awesome. I'm still thinking like CIA or State Department or who knows what the future is going to be, but I'm here, I'm learning Chinese, I'm going to learn the culture. And now I'm like on a, in an academic setting, and I'm in a factory, like, It's awesome. And eventually I went to work for that company full time. And after 2 years, just being so focused on their infrastructure and their transportation infrastructure, and thinking, there's a billion people riding bicycles here. We've got the best bicycle lock in the world. I am going to strike it rich and retire by like 25 or 26, which none of that happened. But what I ended up realizing was like, there's a billion people riding bicycles here. None of them want bicycles, and they're building highways and tunnels and bridges so fast. I don't know anything about climate change, but what does it mean when there's a billion people, more people driving cars? And then what does that mean when the same happens in India and Eastern Europe and other developing countries as they raise their standard of living? Ultimately, that led me to uh, a lot of eye-opening around global warming, climate change, whatever word you want to call it, and that led to a whole journey career then in kind of the nexus of business and sustainability into the work I do today.
That's so cool. So, what did you do after China? Where'd you go? How did you start this pathway once you had that realization?
Well, I came back to the States eventually and decided that I was going to go get my MBA, go to business school, and still very interested in international business. So I went to a school called Thunderbird, which is a fascinating place. It's actually on an Air Force base in just outside of Phoenix in Glendale, Arizona, started by an admiral right after World War II who felt like, okay, with the rebuilding of Japan and with the rebuild, the Marshall Plan of Europe, we're going to need American executives who know culture, business, and language to go overseas and kind of be these emissaries and help do this. And so that was the foundation for this business school. And so I ended up going there, and it was in Glendale, Arizona, which is a place that's has just about every fast food chain, kind of anything that's sort of soulless and not local, like just go to Glendale. And then in the middle of that is this Air Force base, it's probably the most international place in America, maybe outside the UN in New York City, because you get like students coming there, MBAs from all over the world, and Americans who actually have been overseas and are going back overseas. So I went there, and as I was going through business school, and then I went through the dot-com bubble, I still couldn't shake this feeling like I've seen the future. I saw it in China. I know what's coming. I can get very excited about this business school course about international marketing and bringing like Colgate toothpaste to Saudi Arabia for like 10 minutes. And then I'm like, yeah, that's fun and interesting and cool, but like there's a crisis that is coming and I can't be thinking about toothpaste in Saudi Arabia. It took me a really long time, honestly, coming home from China, about 5 or 6 years, until I realized that the way that I was going to try to affect change starting out was to think like, we're in America, we're a consumer culture. I am going to see if I can create companies or work on businesses that help consumers start to consume in a more sustainable manner. That's my starting point. So I started a company in 2004. It was called Vivavi, kind of like Viva V, live life. And it ended up becoming like a modern design, sustainable furniture company. So I was gathering furniture designers from all over America who were about my age, probably, late 20s, early 30s, who had enough kind of apprenticeship and expertise and knowledge to design really cool stuff. And we're also of a similar mindset of like, they wanted to make stuff for themselves that was contemporary, that was modern, but that was also environmentally responsible. And that combination of modern contemporary design and sustainability was entirely new 2 decades ago.
Right.
It's still moving and growing and it's not
Mhm.
fully mainstream yet, but it was like nothing. And what was so fascinating to me was, one, to try and build a business around that. And I had a couple of showrooms in New York City, one I lived in for 4 years because I was bootstrapping this thing. That's a whole different, story. But what was so interesting to me was like something was happening across America, probably, across the world, where people were like at the same time waking up to this idea. How can I live a modern contemporary lifestyle and align that with my values about the environment, around social causes? How could we do that? And so it was really fun to be there as that was kind of taking root in America 2 decades ago.
That's so cool. I love your excitement. Your excitement is very infectious. I can imagine that's why you've mobilized people, because it's not enough to just have a good idea. And I don't know, you might not even have the solution, but you're kind of just there, like, there is something we need to do. The thing that worries me when I hear people talking so passionately is, especially in the climate crisis, is urgency leads to quick action, right? It's like, there's an emergency, we have to fix it now, we have to do this now. How do you balance that? Like, how do you make decisions when it comes to speed, scale, and then the integrity of putting everything together?
Yeah, I love that question. And then I would layer on top of it, as someone who works in startups, that brings its own urgency, and then you're balancing what is urgent versus knowing it's going to take years to actually sometimes commercialize a
Of course.
technology or a product, right? So that time scale thing is really tricky, and especially around climate, where we think we've got to mobilize people now. And yeah, if they wake up and they're like, oh my God, I want to go, 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 and they're actually in that space, and then they're like, well, geez, like, can I really keep this up for 50 years or net zero by 2050? Like, how do you sustain?
Mhm.
Gosh, it's a really good question. For me, I am I'm someone who I think of myself as just as a creative, and my creative expression often takes the form of starting companies, but I don't really think of myself as like, oh, I'm an entrepreneur. Or, oh, I just think of like, there's something that I think is missing in the world that I really want to bring into the world. And so, I've worked on a number of different companies and number of different projects, written books, had TV shows. I mean, I've been very fortunate, but it's also, for me, it's like I know the lane I want to be in terms of the kind of change I want to affect, but I'm very open to kind of taking on new projects and keeping it fresh for me so I can still stay kind of, energetic and recognize that this is my project for now. This is the work I'm doing for now. It may not be the work for my entire life, and I'm okay with that as long as I'm in my lane of trying to continue to affect positive change around solving the climate crisis.
Definitely. Is there a personal attachment that you have to just what's happening on the climate sector in general? Is there a specific pain point that you sort of deal with or that you're trying to solve with the companies that you create at the moment?
No, I wouldn't say so. I mean, I'm always just very focused for me on carbon reduction. I know we have like the UN Sustainability Development Goals, and I support all of that. But for me, it is really about there is this climate crisis, and that is where my focus goes. And I would say probably just something in my own personality and my own psyche, why that is just feels so core to me, is that I've always been someone who is looking for, like, what's the biggest thing happening in the world? How do I go be part of it? How do I position myself? Because like I want to, be in the biggest arena. And that's why I went to China in the 1990s, because I was thinking about diplomacy, international relations, and I thought, to me, it was like, okay, it's very obvious that in the 21st century, China and the US, this will become the most important bilateral relationship in the world.
Hmm.
And that was an early insight. I wasn't the first one to figure that out, but certainly it was pretty early to
Hmm.
see that. And I wanted to position myself to have a role in it. And then because I was there, I started to see this other thing, like, oh, this sustainability thing is going to become huge. And I
Hmm.
was keying into some early research that was taking place in like 1998 around, what were they called? Different names, but like the Bohemian bourgeoisie. It was like all these 60s hippies and radical kids who like grew up and went to Wall Street and wanted really nice stuff, but they wanted to be like gardening and back to the land, but now they wanted to wear their like Prada shoes in
Um,
the garden. And I just thought, like, yeah, this is it. This is gonna be massive in the 21st, and this is where my values are moving. I want to play in that space. And so that has never changed for me. There's been other little sort of side things that I've been involved in, like in some respects, I took a break from sustainability climate in 2013. My family, like my wife, my young kids, we moved to Asheville, North Carolina. I'd been working for Amazon. And within Amazon, I was building this business called Vine.com, like tomato on a vine, which was like an online natural organic sustainability, like specialty website. Amazon owns a bunch of websites. I didn't love working within, kind of the Amazon empire. It wasn't a great fit for me, and there was a lot about that was frustrating. So I moved down to Asheville, and I was like, well, this place in general is aligned with my values, because it's kind of like, there's like Burlington, Berkeley, Asheville, these sort of kind of, as this actress Kirsten Dunst, they filmed a movie in Asheville called Masterminds, and I heard her on, I don't know, Jimmy Kimmel or Jimmy Fallon talking about her time in Asheville, and she's like, yeah, it's basically where like hippies go to die. So that's like where I was raising my family. So I was like, okay, well, whatever I do here is probably going to be aligned with my values. And what I ended up doing was I got hired to run something that I built called Venture Asheville, which was essentially building Asheville, North Carolina's startup community and entrepreneurial ecosystem. So how do you help founders get the capital, get the team, get the mentorship, get all the resources to build high growth companies. And a lot of those companies, by virtue of that type of culture, a lot of those companies were sustainably driven. So
Right.
my work was to support the city. So it wasn't like, directly
Mhm.
like one-to-one, everything's sustainable. But I did that work. And as I was doing that work, I was like, oh, this kind of startup community entrepreneurial ecosystem thing, this is going to be a really big deal. And I was like, I'm not the first one to see it, but I'm kind of early to see it. And I
Mhm.
love doing that work too. And now it is a really big deal, all over the world. So like, that's my sort of, um, I don't know if I would say superpower, but it's like because I'm probably thinking so much about where the world's going, I key
Mhm.
into those things. And for me, the one thing that just never really, the one thing that's completely stuck is climate change, biggest challenge of the 21st century. I'm just always going to work on this.
Yeah. And it sounds like you've got an incredible gut feeling.
Yeah, I suppose that's right. Yeah, thank you.
It's like, see, it's a huge challenge to see writing on the wall and see most people ignore it and then say, no, actually, I'm going to go for it because the writing is on the wall, right? Most people just don't. They're like, nah, that's not
Ignorance
real.
is bliss, remember?
No, I was gonna ask, like, you sound very much like someone who's very optimistic about our place and where we can go, right? What we can do about climate change, about sustainability. How would you respond to the people that say that what you want is like to have your cake and eat it too? You want there to be like a bunch of startups. You want, I think realistically, right? You want to be able to keep on having all these luxuries and being able to consume these unique products and constantly have innovation while also helping the environment, which I feel a lot of people are skeptical about. They're like, we have to cut back on everything. How would you respond, or what would you respond to that? Do you agree? Do you disagree?
What I would say, and I mean this kindly, is they don't know what they're talking about.
Mhm.
Ooh.
Okay.
Because if you look at where we're going, I would say two things. And I know maybe that sounds harsh, and it sounds probably harsher than the way I think about it. But I think two things. If you look at what's happening today and the business models that are emerging, and this is the realm that where I think about a lot, but not even just business models. If you talk to mayors of like cutting edge cities, which I do, like I had a conversation recently with like the former mayor of like Barranquilla in Colombia, right? And he did something where he was like, look, we're going to go plant all these trees. And people are like, no, it's going to be too expensive, or no, like they're going to get in the way. And he was like, well, look at this. In London, where trees have been intentionally planted, the value of the buildings and the homes on those streets have gone up by 10%. And that means tax revenue has also gone up by 10%. And so the return on investment for the city, if we plant these trees in a very hot area where kids are like sometimes even passing out on the way to school, will not only have these health benefits, it's actually going to pay for itself. There's a return on investment to the city, right? And if we build these parks, and if we like take care of our parks, we will revitalize the local economies, and we will have places where people can congregate, and we can bring more greenery into our, like, et cetera, right? So that's not even like me pitching a business, right? That's like the mayor of, in Colombia, who knows that it's ridiculous to even think about like the responsibility of his citizens for climate change when the carbon impact of one of their sins is like 1/15 of an American. But yet the business case or the economic case is so compelling. And so to me, what I think is like on this macro level, where if you're in a city and you're thinking, you're the mayor, you're in city planning, you're like, hey, how are we going to raise the quality of life for our citizens? What should we do, right? Anything you do to do that, okay, we got to fix public transit, we got to put in better bike lanes, we got to create more pedestrian friendly places for people to be able to get to where they want to go. All of that's going to raise the quality of life, and all of that's going to cut carbon footprints, right? And it's like the linkage goes both ways. When you look at, I was recently talking with an executive, this guy has an amazing job at Schneider Electric, which many consider, it's always winning these awards, one of the most sustainable companies in the world. It's a French company. They do a lot of like infrastructure. I mean, stuff, it's like invisible stuff, but they're a big company. And the guy I was talking to who's written like 6 books, he's the head of their internal think tank, and his job is to like think about what's going to happen 25 years from now and work backwards and be like, where should we go as a company? Like who could have a better job? And he said to me, he's like, can you think of anything, Josh, that is like a modern upgrade that is not electric? Anything, right? Like electric cars, right, are way better than gas-powered cars. Things that are happening in homes today where induction range cooking is considered by many top chefs to be far superior than cooking on a flame. The problem is that if you live in a house and you want induction range, and at least in America, you can go buy that oven, that stove, whatever, but you might need to spend thousands of dollars to run a different power line to your kitchen. So this company called Copper figured out, well, geez, if we put a battery inside the induction range, then you can just plug it into the same outlet as your toaster, and the battery will charge during the day, and the 3, maybe 4 times you want to cook, you're going to have all the energy you need, and you can avoid that, right? And so the modern thing is actually the better quality of life thing, better cooking, and increasingly accessible. So where I'm going is like, however we upgrade our lives from here on, it's going to be electrified. And if you can, and we see, this is the last thing I'll say, and I'll pause, but like in 2024 and in 2025 globally, over $2 trillion each year was invested into clean energy. That's solar, that's wind, that's electric vehicles, that's upgrading grids, $2 trillion. In 2025, it was $2.2 trillion globally. It's the first year that's ever doubled what's gone into fossil fuel investment. And so like the scale of what we can't see, because a lot of this stuff is like invisible, but solar fields that are like hundreds, if not thousands of hectares, right? This is the world that we're moving into. And so I think that the future can be, there's no guarantees, can be better than today, abundant, more prosperous. And by trying to pursue that, we will cut carbon. Can I give one more example?
Yes.
I know I'm just like rambling on here.
No,
okay,
no.
So you mentioned in the intro that I had started this company called Planted. I recently returned to Planted as a fractional chief marketing officer, because now we're 5 years in, and we're evolving as a company. So I've come back in to kind of clarify the story, kind of coordinate the team, take us on this next part of the mission. Planted makes building materials out of fast-growing grass, kind of like bamboo. It's not bamboo, but it's thinner. And we're to pull carbon from the atmosphere 10 times faster than trees, because this grass grows 10 times faster than trees. It's structural. It has the same kind of structure as trees. And then I started this thing with a team of SpaceX, these brilliant engineers. And so we took a mill that has massive smokestacks that's spewing lots of, carbon emissions into the air by trying to take trees and turn them into like plywood or materials to build homes. We basically shrunk that thing down to something that's like 140 feet long, goes in any warehouse, you can plug it in, and out the other end comes like similar building materials, just made out of grass instead of trees. And we work with the largest home builder in America now, D.R. Horton, that gave us an order last year for 100 million of these panels. And so this means every time you build a house now with our materials, you're actually taking carbon from the atmosphere and locking it away in your walls. And it's stronger and it's more moisture resistant. And so in my mind, it's like, build more. The more you build, the more you're actually taking carbon from where it's like really harmful in the atmosphere and putting it somewhere where, because carbon's actually good as a useful building material, you're putting it somewhere where it's doing good. Carbon's just in the wrong place, and we need to put it in the right place. And so that's what informs my mental model.
That's really awesome. I think that's like a mentality that a lot of people would go away from it just on principle, even though it's not practical, right? Like they're like, okay, maybe we can, but we shouldn't, because all this chase of innovation is what got us here in the first place, right? But I really like talking with people that are like, no. If you really look at the practicality, it's just way more practical to do things, to just go with the progress, and at least in this field, right? Because there's progress that's kind of, but as a sustainability thing, it's just wait. It just seems like we are really developing the technologies to trap carbon, to make people's lives better, more convenient, and sustainable, right?
I mean, I guess what I'd say is like, that's the future that I latch onto. And I also see the flip side of it, right? It's just not my focus, because there's nothing I can do about it. And what I mean by that is, we started Planted in a town called Oxford, North Carolina, about 45 minutes north of Raleigh, Durham. And it's awesome. We moved into a former American Spirit cigarette factory because they shut down. And so there's like, we're actually in this tobacco factory. There's these cool murals on the wall. And I feel like, okay, these past century, this industry from, that is beyond its time, is going away. We are the 21st century thing. And we started this whole new climate crop, and we've got tobacco farmers converting to our crop. And it's an amazing story, right? But at the same time, when I first moved down or was looking at, well, where are we going to live as we move to Raleigh, Durham? When you drive on the outskirts of Raleigh, you just see, because this is an area that's one of the fastest growing in America, just this suburban spread and sprawl, right? And you hear the governor. And at this time, like for a number of years, I was on his entrepreneurial council. And so that was a nice experience. And I would go down for meetings too. And I would like drive around, be like, where are we going to live? And I would see the sprawl and I'd be like, here's a Democratic governor. He's very practical. He's getting, a lot of props because he's got a climate plan for North Carolina. But that is a bunch of BS, because you can have all the climate plans you want, but if you're going to allow suburban sprawl, that just like people are going to be in their cars forever, and like we have to convert to electric, but it might not happen fast enough. Like I get all that too, right? Like I'm not blind to the arguments of why that someone would say, kind of countering what I'm suggesting. Like I see all that too, but I guess the question is, or I guess my view is, both can be true at once, right? And so where do you want to put your attention? Not to deny like this sad reality of how we are developing as humans at the same time as this new thing is birthing called the low carbon economy. But where do you want to focus your attention? Because that's really like the one thing you can control, right? That's what you have agency over, is where do you want to go put your focus and what do you want to affect in the world?
Yeah. And was that the motivation behind the Lazy Environmentalist then? Sort of understanding that as passionate and driven as you are with all these big ideas, there's still a big number of the population that is like, I have no idea. Like there's no point.
The Lazy Environmentalist started in an extremely personal place. And that's when I mentioned I had started this furniture company. And I decided, I left out a little bit of my story, but I had gone into a PhD program at George Washington University to study political science and environment and China. And I probably had some like Jack Ryan fantasy, because like get my PhD and be like, because I'm kind of an idiot that way. And I was a semester into this thing and I was like, oh, hell no, my brain just does not, I can't, I just can't, like I have to go. And so I started Vivavi. I quit that program. I was just such a doofus. I was like 30 years old. I emailed all my like professors. I'm like, hey, sorry, family emergency. Like not coming to class there. And in a PhD program, like they're just like way too lenient because I guess they figure you're like a responsible person, And I'm like, I'll keep the student loans, but I'm gonna like just do my own thing for a little bit, and I'll be a TA for this class or whatever, and started trying to build this company. And anyway, I realized I was going to move it to Brooklyn after about a year and a half. I had one employee working for me in DC, just this little startup working out of my house, a little e-commerce site to begin with. And she wasn't moving to New York with me, but we made a deal. I was like, look, if you help me pack up, I will, because I'm moving to Brooklyn, I'll give you the van that we would take to trade shows and stuff as like a parting gift. This has been great working together. So she was like, yes. And so she helps pack me up and we get on the New Jersey Turnpike. It's late at night. It's probably like midnight. Now we're driving up to Brooklyn to go to this apartment where I'm subletting a room. I haven't been there. And Lucy, this young woman I was young too, but whatever. She's like in the passenger seat, like kind of hyperventilating, like, and I'm like, what is going on? I'm like, are you all right? And she says, Josh, look, I have to ask you something. I have to get this off my chest. This was in 2004. She's like, I couldn't ask you when you're my boss, but you're not my boss anymore. I'm like, oh, that's all true. She's like, there's something I just really need to know. And so I immediately thought like, oh my God, no. She's attracted to me.
Yeah.
She said, I was like, she's attracted to me. This is crazy.
This is awkward.
Yeah. So awkward, like what's going to happen? Yeah. Where's this night going? I'm going to a new apartment. Never been there. I'm subletting a room. There's a roommate. I don't even know where the key is. Like what's going on? So I get really nervous and I'm like, but this is kind of cool. So I'm like, it's okay. You can tell me anything, like anything. It's totally fine. So finally she works up her nerve and she's like, okay, I don't want you to take this the wrong way. But are you really an environmentalist? And she's like, so first of all, not at all attractive. She's like, you're always in the shower, you barely recycle, you were going to throw your bed out, I took it to the home show. Like, basically, like, you are an a-hole and a hypocrite, and you're selling all this eco stuff, but like, you're the worst environmentalist I've ever met. And I just like, I almost just started laughing because it was like so true, it was so true. And she's like, and I don't understand you because you're devoting your entire life to this mission and cause, but like, what? And so the Lazy Environmentalist, I wrote a blog about myself because I figured, I'm just going to own this authentically. It's true. And so I wrote a little blog on our little furniture company's website called The Lazy Environment's about myself. And I was like, I take long showers. I do my best thinking in the shower. I'm not going to change, even though I really care about the environment. And I know I'm using water and energy. I need an amazing low flow shower head, right? With sick pressure to solve this for me, right? I want an Audi TT convertible. If I could afford it, I don't care if it's electric or biodiesel or hydrogen. Like, if it's green and it's what I want, I'll do it. But I'm lazy and I need convenience. And I feel like there's millions of Americans who feel like I do, that if it were easy for us and aligned with our values and fit our lives because we're so busy, we would do it too. And that, I was like, I'm a lazy environmentalist. And then right place, right time, that concept became a Sirius XM radio show and a reality TV show. But it was born out of that, recognizing my own behavioral challenges, right? And feeling like probably a lot of other people would feel that way too.
Then in that case, if someone, who's listening wanted to contribute to climate solutions, but they're kind of like, but I have to fly to give this workshop about how to cut carbon, like all these things that we deal with in the climate space, what would you tell them?
Well, I'm hearing two things. I'm hearing, one, the hypocrisy of like, okay, well, so one, if like, I think about that. Every time I see Katy Perry flying somewhere to like talk about climate change, I'm just like, what? Like, first of all, I'm like, why is anybody even writing about this? Because like, this is so stupid. Or like, but then like the criticism of like, oh, well, Al Gore, flies all over the world giving his talks. And I'm like, well, what else is he supposed to do? So of course he's going to go fly all over the world. I don't know. Yeah. I know Greta Thunberg, she took a sailboat to, or she's sailing, and not flying. It's like, well, okay. I mean, I get the stand she's taking. I don't know. I don't know the answer to that because I just think this is really complex.
Yeah.
And I think people have to figure out where those lines are for themselves, like, because, the question is, what do you think really moves the needle? And what I mean by that is, do you think, okay, I have a job where I need to get in a plane and go fly somewhere to give a talk. What happens if I get to that talk and I influence someone who influences someone who influences someone? Like, how do I quantify that value versus what I can clearly quantify is like, one of 150 people on this plane. This plane emits XYZ carbon. I may be responsible for this and much carbon, even though this plane was going to fly whether I was on it or not. Like, how you do that math or how you kind of think about that equation in your own mind, I don't have an answer for how someone lines up their own equation to figure out where they net out. I don't know. I do think that we are still in this movement building phase. And I still think that like, you don't need to move everybody. So if you're in a position to get on a plane and go move the people who are open and want to get moved, I feel like that's still a really good thing to do. And the only thing I would say to quantify that, and it's not a direct link, but I will say this, because this is my mental model. Years ago, and I can't think of the woman's name. I thought she was a professor, maybe a professor at Harvard, but this woman studies movements, like mass movements that are successful. And it's not necessarily mass movements for climate, but like mass movements for, let's say, massive political change, like in Argentina, where maybe they're trying to topple the government or create reform, like that type of thing, right? As countries are, and a lot of it's democratization. But her research found that you don't need the whole country to mobilize to actually affect that change. And the tipping point tends to be when something like 4 to 5% of the population is in the streets that tends to be the tipping point, because at 4 to 5%, that means that everybody knows somebody who's out there. It could be an aunt, an uncle, a cousin, a daughter, or whatever, but everybody knows someone, and everybody has a stake now in those protesters or marchers or mobilizers being safe, and how the government's going to react. And that tends to be when change happens. And that says to me, we don't need everybody, right? Like, you need some amount of critical mass who really cares to keep caring, and we're going to get there.
Yeah. And it sort of exemplifies what we always hear about the importance of networking, right? It might be worth taking that plane to go give that talk, because you'll be in the right rooms with the right people, meet the right people, and then they will spread it over. And yeah, we're social creatures. So networks are extremely important to us, and we love a good story, you know? So if you can tell the right story to the right person, not everyone needs to hear it, but the right person's kind of gonna carry that with you. So what's your story? What narrative do you want to leave us with?
I would just say that there is so much more good stuff happening than many of us realize. And I do think that the key thing for all of us is to decide where we're going to put our focus, right? Not to deny the scariness of this moment, the overwhelm of what's happening in climate, the impacts that communities are already feeling today, right? That is so difficult and so challenging and so hurtful and harmful. And yet, to hold that understanding and see that the future we really want is actually being built today. It's not evenly distributed, right? It's not everywhere at once, but the pieces are out there. And the more that I do think, like you're saying, the more we focus there and spread that information as fast as possible, that's my theory of change, right? Like, to understand what is real, what is operational, what is commercialized, what is de-risked, so that others could do it too, and then help that awareness move as fast as possible around the world, so we can get to this, abundant, prosperous, low carbon future.
I love it. Thank you so much, Josh, for being on Tangelic Talks. We're going to stay on for a bit longer, but you can find Josh on our blog, and all his links, all his work. We're going to stay on with him so he can talk us through some climate solutions, finance, and a bit of scaling, because I really want to touch on that again. Is there anything that you want to let our listeners know that is coming out for you, that you want to plug, website that you want them to check out?
Yeah, thank you. Well, our website for Supercool, so where we're covering the rise of the low carbon economy and the companies helping to build it, is getsuper.cool. We just launched a new newsletter, so that comes out on Tuesdays, called Deployed. And Deployed is what happened in the past week to build the low carbon economy, what went operational. I love it. It's a really cool, it's like, to me, it's like the new geography of the low carbon economy. And so, yeah, if people are interested in that type of thing, I'd encourage them to check it out.
Perfect. We're going to link that on the blog, so check it out at tangeliclife.org, and we'll catch you guys on the next one. Bye.